All right. Welcome to class. Email me anytime. Can a submarine swim? Everybody's going to answer this question. You can say yes or no or something else. And say your name when you do it. Brian?
No. Brian. I'm Michael. I'd say no. I'm Ian. I'd say yes. Anthony, I'd say no.
I'm James. I say yes.
No?
Yeah. Yes.
I think I'm Emily, and I think that's
Oh, it's the first depends all day. All right.
I'm Connor. I'd say yes. I'm Brandon. I say no. Arjun, I'd say yes. Lewis, I'd say no. Okay, I say yes. Peter, I say yes.
All right. For our one depends, tell us more.
well, okay. I feel like it achieves the functionality of swimming, but how do we like define swimming? Like, do we need appendages to do that, or
A good point though, because like somebody's just gonna float, right? They're just in the water, they're floating. They're not like moving their arms and swimming.
Yeah.
So like,
What are you saying?
they got turbines. Hold on. Is that swimming though?
Swimming, the activity is propelling oneself through the water using limbs.
It's the
That's
whole
that's a limb.
What's a limb? How do you define limb?
Yeah.
Retrieving bones. Okay. These questions they brought up, we were all thinking of those, right? Edgar Dijkstra, one of the great computer scientists, said the question of whether or not a submarine can swim is really about the same as whether or not a machine can think. This class is about machines that think, right? Can a machine think? Think about it for a second. Then you're going to raise your hands. Who thinks the machine can think? Yes. If you say yes, raise your hand. Oh, only two of you? Three? Wow. Because we were really split like half and half on the swimming thing. How many of you said that a submarine can swim? Raise your hands. That's a lot of you. And hardly any of you said that machines can think. Well, do we have to define thinking? Give me one or two definitions. Even you all the smartest people in the world. So many of the smartest people in the world, like one of my heroes, Dr. Roger Penrose, who's a professor in England. He has tried to find consciousness, and a lot of people disagree with him. He won the Nobel Prize in physics, and like only a small percentage of people agree with him. And there's 10 other definitions out there. It's the hardest thing to define in science, as far as I can tell. The crazy thing about it is we know it exists because we all have it. At least I have it. I don't know that you have it. I'm going to trust you. Other definitions of thinking.
Having like perspective, an aspect of like, I don't know, like
if you have like an AI that's good at chess, like actually having like the perspective of what chessboard is, what chess is, rather than just being able to supply the best.
Mm-hmm. And that's really important when you write a program that plays chess, because if you write a program that learns how to play chess, and then you give it a board that's different, like instead of the normal size board, what if it's, you know, different like this or something, you know? And you maybe don't even give it all the pieces. It's a smaller board. The lines are a little bit different. If you put two humans in front of this, they'll still be able to play. They'll still have a fun time. But a computer might just get totally confused, right? Because maybe it learned to play chess, but it doesn't even know what a chessboard is. Do you think a fish knows what water is? So do you have to know what you're in to be able to understand it or to be thinking? So one of the things you guys have been mentioning is something akin to symbolics. So symbolics is, can you manipulate symbols? And those symbols could be numbers, they could be chess pieces, they could be anything out there in the world. You guys imagine a problem to solve. Like, let's say the problem is I need to build something. Like if you need to build a house, all the little problems you need to solve along the way, what are some of the symbols you might encounter? Some of the things you need to think about. If you had to write a program that was going to build the house for you, what would that program need to know about?
The area that you have to work with.
Area. So the concept of area, length times width, right? Materials. Materials. And there are software packages that in which you can do your design, your three-dimensional design, and it knows every material that is available to construction. Every type of wood, every type of screw, every type of glue, insulation. Those are like the symbols. Cost, dollars. The dollars are a very important symbol here because if that goes below zero, you may not get your house. Very good. So symbolics manipulating symbols. Now, a symbol is something that references something else. That's all it is, right? And if we have a symbol for something like a piece of wood, that is referencing something physical, tangible. But we can also have a symbol like liberty. You can't touch liberty. Not tangible, but it's still something we think about. When I think about something in my head, when I think about a certain symbol, what actually happens in my head? What do you think? What's the physical thing going on? Yes, neurons are firing. What they found, interestingly, is that most Americans now have a Joe Rogan neuron. Even if you don't like Joe Rogan, you just hear his name or hear his voice or see a picture of him, there is at least one neuron in your brain that fires. And you have one for, most celebrities that you know about. In a computer, it's good to have the same kind of thing. You will have some bit somewhere in the computer that becomes a 1 when that thing is present and 0 when it's not. That's one way to represent a symbol in a computer and why it's similar to what's going on in your head. Now, Marvin Minsky is very famous as an early leader in symbolics. And he believed that all of AI could be done that way. All of it. There's nothing else. That's how you do AI. And he thought at one point that we're about 20 years away from having something as great as a human mind. He said that in the early 60s. It didn't happen. Look outside for a moment. Now, stop looking outside. When you remember what you saw, how many blades of grass do you think you saw? More than 10? More than 1 million? Less than 1 million? More than 100,000? What do you think? Throw out a number. Okay, good number. You did not register each one of those blades of grass as a symbol, did you? What did your brain do? Estimated. But when you looked out there, you could see blades of grass. I can see individual blades. I need glasses, but I can still see. Yet none of them are symbols. Like registered the few. Okay. Okay. Then the leaves on that tree, same kind of thing. That the bush, I mean, that bush is one thing. But over there, there's a bunch of trees, and I can't separate those trees. I mean, some of them, I might be looking at leaves that are from one tree or 2 different trees. I'm not feeling confused though. I'm just kind of looking at it, enjoying the scene. You're going to say something? No? So, is there something else besides symbolics?
Just like thought about taking those smaller symbols and consolidating them.
Okay. Would you want to dedicate a neuron, a whole neuron, to remembering just that cluster of trees up there?
Well, yeah, and then also like then how you decide like what gets like I don't know how our brains process like how you tell the artificial intelligence like how to decide what to put together.
Yeah. I'm working on this problem. It's a hard problem, but it's important for fighting fires.
Just like a friend,
Yes. I've seen one play draft before, throwing the green parts of the sidewalk. Yeah. So learn the pattern. That's exactly right, what you said at the beginning. But sometimes we can learn a pattern without any symbols. What do I mean? In the back of your eye, here's the front. Everything you see, like it's green. We got some tree here. Seeing this tree, as you all probably know, it gets inverted by the lens of your eye and comes into focus on the back of your retina. And it's something like this back here. Now, the back of your eye, your retina, has neurons. When your brain was forming, some of your brain slowly gets forced out the eye sockets and becomes part of your eye. This is the only part of your brain which is outside of the central casing of the skull. These are actual neurons, and they are processing information. If you zoom in on a tiny part of this, let's zoom in on this. We'll have some region, and the light falling on it, part of it is green. You'll have some like some white here, let's say for cloudy sky or something. You don't have like cells everywhere. You have fewer visual cells than you would think. So let's say they're kind of like this. How many visual cells do you think you have in the back of just one of your eyes? Now, for comparison, this monitor is probably 2,000 pixels across, and maybe 1,000 pixels down, something like that. How many more pixels than that screen do you think you have in the back of your eye? Or in comparison to that? You definitely can see clearer than that picture looks, right? I look around and I'm seeing like the best HD I've ever seen, right? Better than any screen. Turns out in the back of the human eye, there's about 1 million receptor cells. 1 million, that's it. That's 1,000 times 1,000. If you had a screen of 1,000 times 1,000, that's the same number of pixels as the cells in the back of your eye. Now, some of them are for color, some for brightness and darkness. So it's even worse than that. But what's happening here is you have a bunch of cells that are sensitive to either light here or this light here. And there's a few that are too near the edge and they're a little confused. So since they are neurons and they can communicate with each other, they do. And these ones on the edge, they're communicating with their neighbors to see, hey, what color do you think it is? And this guy's like, I'm pretty sure it's green. He's like, no, it's not. He's like, no, it's not. Oh, yeah, it is. No, it's not. And because of these little arguments that happen, in aggregate, they end up telling your central consciousness that there is a perfectly straight green line here. But they didn't see a perfectly straight green line. But they were able to infer it. This isn't symbolism. This isn't symbolics. What's going on here is something different. There's connections between the neurons that are voting on what to say, green or not green, or this color or that color. That's connection. And we're going to see more of that later on in the course. So whenever anyone talks about using human neurons as an analog for something in AI, that's under the broad field of connectionism. Now, everything that's popular right now is a neural net. OpenAI, they made DALL-E and ChatGPT. These models that everyone's using now, they are all neural networks. And people have gotten so much on the bandwagon, they forget about symbolics. Connectionism is all about learning functions, really. Through neurons. And they can be real neurons or artificial neurons. And Frank Rosenblatt made the first neural network Can anyone guess what decade he did it in?
The 80s.
58. That's when the first neural network came along. If you ever have any idea that anyone tells you that's never going to be anything, just wait 60 years. 2012 is when neural networks really started to pick up steam, become a thing that other people cared about. 1958 to 2012. That's a long time to wait. Now, I heard a rumor, not quite sure if it's true, but in the 1940s, these two guys went to the same high school. And this debate in AI is still going on today. In fact, some people are calling this type 1 AI and this type 2 AI. So they're a lot different, but obviously we use both of them in the brain. When you are absorbing a lot of input from your neurons in your eyes, for instance, you're using type 1. When you're doing a math problem, like, a train leaves Cincinnati at 6 p.m. going 100 miles an hour, how long until it gets to New York? You're going to sit down with a pencil and paper. You're going to do type 2 thing. Daniel Kahneman is a winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics. And he's the first one to describe this process in the human brain. He called them System 1 and System 2. And he was talking about this for a while, and he got a Nobel Prize if people paid attention. And then a guy named Yoshua Bengio realized that that was the same dichotomy that we already had in AI. Type 1 and type 2. He was the first one to make that connection. Now, I think he was lucky that the 1s and 2s matched up. They couldn't have flipped. Is that all there is? Could there be a type 3 someday? Something to think about. But as far as I know, these are the only two types of thinking that we know of. And we use both. To use both in AI is still very hard. Most people just do one or the other. There's a guy named Gary Marcus who testified before Congress recently. Have any of you heard his name? He's a computer science professor. And he was one of 3 people that Congress invited to come tell them how scared they should be about AI. The AI is going to take over the world and all that. And he said in a different time, in this TED Talk, that combining type 1 and type 2 AI is the $64 trillion question. So obviously there's a lot of value if we can combine these two types. Somehow your brain does it. Okay, now talk about going back in time. Thomas Hobbes in the 1600s. I guess he was a secretary of Sir Francis Bacon, who some of you may have heard of as well. Reasoning is but reckoning. Argumentation is reducible to calculation. Does that apply more to type 1 or type 2? 2, very much so. I think all of the early guys were only thinking about type 2. Alan Turing, Alonzo Church. Computation is an operation that begins with some initial conditions and gives an output which follows from a definite set of rules. So everything is deterministic. You have rules that you apply to the initial state, and that gets you the next state, gets you the next state, gets you the next state. I don't think creativity works that way, does it? Someone mentioned that we need creativity for true thinking, right? Any real-world computation can be translated into an equivalent computation involving a Turing machine, which we'll look at in a minute. But first, the Turing test. How many of you have heard of this? So when I started studying this, no one had any idea for sure if a computer would ever pass the Turing test. And the Turing test had a number of rules. It was text only. You have a computer and you have a person, but they're behind a wall. And you've got a third person, which actually in the real test is a group of judges, maybe like 10 judges or something. And the idea is that if you can trick at least half the judges, then you passed the Turing test. And typically there's a certain number of questions you're allowed to ask. They're all text-based questions. But when I was your age, we literally did not know if computers would ever pass this. And now they pass it all the time, every day. I mean, there are so many times every day when humans out there see something written by GPT and they think that a human wrote it. Is that a good thing or a bad
It depends.
thing? Tell us why. What's your name again?
I'm Brandon. It could be a good thing because like teachers won't know.
Yeah, we call it cheat GPT.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. Makes sense. It could be bad. See, I'm not sure why it could be
I mean, it could probably be bad. You may not be actually learning anything for yourself, rather than just sort of, and if there's no checks and balances on it, you have no idea of what you're turning in or asking GPT to create and just turning it in.
Yeah, that guy's getting inspired probably. What if GPT or some hacker decided, okay, I'm gonna write some program that's gonna go out and try to hack as many people's computers as it can. And once it gets in, it's gonna read your emails, learn your writing style and your close relationships, and then reach out to all those people and tell them some story like, I just got through an accident, I need some money, please send it to this bank account, and do that, at scale. This is the kind of thing we have to worry about. Because these large language models, LLMs, can learn your style. They can learn to write your style. Have any of you ever been the subject of a scam? One day, I got an email from my boss, and he says, I'm with clients right now, and I need you to go out and get a Google Play card. And then, send me the $1,500, whatever. And he kept emailing me. And all this time, I thought it was him. And then I was having a problem with one of them. I called him up and says, what are you talking about? I didn't ask that. So some human knew how to send me the email, make it look like it was from him. And they must have hacked our email system because they knew his writing style and knew the kind of things he would say. And most importantly, they knew he was out of the office because he's usually 15 feet away from them at this company I used to work at. So yes, a human will know those things, but maybe an AI will eventually too. So GPT, good or bad, it can pass the Turing test and it does it really well. And whether it's good or bad depends on what you you guys do with it. It's your generation now that has to grow up with this. Another example that it makes me think of is the beginning of newspapers. When newspapers became a big thing in society, everybody trusted them, right? Then one guy comes along, he's like, you know what? I can save a lot of money if I, instead of hiring reporters, they just stuff up. He did save a lot of money. He was able to make way more papers, and he made more profit on those papers because they're just making stuff up. And if you're freed up and you don't have to report the truth, instead you can report on what people want to hear. People want exciting, scary things. So they were literally writing in newspapers here in America about scientists who had their telescopes pointed at the moon, and they had this new telescope which had higher clarity, and they were able to see bat people on the moon. People that were half human, half bat, living on the moon. And there was this boy up there, they were following the story, the bat boy on the moon, and then it started to get really scary. They were talking about how the bat people on the moon were gathering their forces and preparing to come to Earth and attack us. And some people believed that stuff. Some people did. And you think, oh, some people were in the old days. No one would believe that now. But we all have plenty of examples we've heard of in the last few years of things that are not true, but we thought some people thought they were when they saw them on Facebook or whatever. It's not new. It keeps happening. When email first came around, you would not believe things like emails I got from my grandmother. Things that I think she believed, that's why she passed them on. Or my ex-wife's grandmother. There were stories going around about the aliens that live in the Pleiades, that they were sending us wisdom, and you can capture that with magnetic bracelets, things like this. But when email first came along, it was a new medium, and a lot of people got tricked in certain things. By the time I came along as a kid, I knew not to believe those silly newspapers. They still existed when I was a kid. They would always have some story about Elvis being seen at a gas station, still alive. When GPT started to fill up the internet with all this semi-fake text, you guys are probably going to get a sixth sense and just learn to tune it out. And who knows, maybe people will get off the ass and start spending time in person with other humans. So maybe it will be good in the end. Now, there was a movie called Ex Machina. Did any of you guys see it? Very good movie, and it goes beyond the Turing test. Instead of asking from a faceless interaction, can you tell if the text is coming from a person or not? This movie pauses. If you know for sure it's a computer, can it make you believe it has a consciousness or a soul? Is it like something to be an AI? I know it's like something to be me, and I believe it was like something to be each of my pets that I've had over the years. And I've had many pets, dogs and cats and hamsters and turtles and snakes and frogs and toads and all kinds of things. It may not have been like anything to be a sea urchin, but for most of those other things, I do believe they have a consciousness. If you're a dog, you smell, you see, you run, you feel. It's like something to be. If you're an AI, is it like something to be you? What do you think? I know it's the hardest question in science, but throw some answers out. Why not? What would you do with cameras and microphones? So, like, AI. There was a guy who was fired at Google for saying that one of their models was conscious. Did you hear about that? Yeah. Do any of you think that model was conscious? I don't think it's conscious. And here's why. Once we get to the part of the course we talk about the math involved in LLMs, and just under LLM, you will see that you get the same answer if you use the computer or if you were to take all these matrices, put them on graph paper, just do them out by hand. Of course, it takes forever, so no one's going to do that. But if you did that, you would get the same answer. So is paper plus a pencil conscious? How many of you listen to Lex Friedman, podcaster? I like him a lot. And he started off just doing AI podcasts, but he's branched into all kinds of things now. But one time he was talking to Yosha Bach, who is one of the leading researchers in the world in AI and such, and he asked him, does an AI, can it suffer? I think that's when you have consciousness, if something can suffer or feel joy. Now we can reward an AI, which we do sometimes, to make it go in the right way. We tell it you have to minimize some number. We call that number the loss or the error. And if you minimize that, maybe it's feeling happier, less pain, but it's not really. I mean, if you have a variable and you call this variable pain and force it to make it lower, well, it's really not. It's just like writing a number on a piece of paper. That paper doesn't feel pain. That paper doesn't feel joy. It's not like something to be that. And if you were to instead write joy instead of pain as the name of that variable, does it change? Does it feel joy now? No. No one knows how to define consciousness. If something changes in this year, then my course will be different next year. Who knows? But we're still pretty far away. Okay, this is a Turing machine. Everything in computation can be represented this way. It's not efficient, but it's still true. Alan Turing came up with this idea, and years later, someone made a physical version of it. You have something that can look at one cell at a time on a long tape. Now, best case scenario, this tape is infinite in both directions. In reality, it's just really long. And you can look at a square or a cell, read it, see what's there, and then make a decision to either move left or move right, or erase that symbol. And once you erase it, you can, if you want, write a new symbol there. Now, the simplest set of symbols is just ones and zeros, right? That's the simplest. And you can do interesting things if you are, doing ones and zeros. There's this many kinds of people in the world. Those who understand binary and those who don't. Let's say you had a binary number like this. This is your 1 spot, your 2 spot, your 4 spot, your 8 spot, your 16 spot, and your 32 spot. It's just like the decimal system, but there's only a 0 or a 1 in each place. If you wanted to take this number and divide it by 2, it's so easy. All you do is, I think you cut off this, and you divide it by 2. That's really efficient. And you can do the same thing with normal numbers. If you have, 15,624, or 620, let's say, and you wanted to divide it by 10, all you do is you cut off the end there, and you say, this is our number now. We've divided it by 10. So if you had a function that all it did was divide something by 2, and you wanted to implement that on a Turing machine, it would be very efficient. Because what you say is, wherever my number was, I'm just going to ignore what was to the right. I just move where I'm looking 1 place to the left, and now I've divided by 2. That's just one example, but it turns out every function that's ever been written on any computer can be translated into a Turing machine function. Everything. That means every video rendering, every app, every search function that runs on Google, everything could be converted into something run on a Turing machine. Now, Turing himself did this to study the idea of computation. And he wrote all this before he had touched a single computer. They didn't have computers, so he couldn't touch them and use them. He did this thinking in his head. The guy was an incredible genius. Now, you've all heard of Alan Turing before, right? He's probably part of the reason we don't all speak German right now. He helped us win World War II. And the British government did not treat him well afterwards. It was a travesty. He's a great man. One of the smartest guys of the last century. Him and Einstein and Kurt Gödel. I put them all in the same, and Emily Noether. Okay, so that's a Turing machine, and it's a lot like type 2. Here's Yosh Habak, who I mentioned earlier. We are nothing more than non-deterministic Turing machines, and do not even that, because we don't have infinite memory. So you will have to believe me on the proof that everything you've ever done on a computer could be done on a Turing machine, but it has been proven multiple times. A non-deterministic version of that is one that a Turing machine that doesn't exactly do the same rule every time. So let's say you have a set of rules where when I see this symbol, I'm going to erase it and go to the left or whatever. Instead of exact rules, there are rules with probabilities. So 80% of the time in this situation, I'm going to apply this rule, 20% I'll apply this other rule. And you build up a set of these, a library of these probabilistic rules. Yosh Habak says, that's all we are, and not even that. Now, Yosh Habak was talking to Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman asked him, but this intelligence that you're describing, can it suffer? Yosh Habak didn't have a good answer for that. There's no way for a Turing machine to suffer. He thinks that our suffering is just a function that we simulate. It's not real. Maybe he's had an easy life. Maybe he's never really suffered. I don't know. do you guys think that there's any way that we might just be Turing machines? I don't agree with him either. But if anybody does, I'd love to hear. All right, a physical symbol system is the necessary and sufficient means for general intelligent action. Herbert A. Simon was brilliant, but what he's saying there is that the symbolic side, type 2, is all you need. That's everything. You don't need anything else. I think he's wrong. You do need something like connectionism as well. Okay, in the 1940s, we had the ENIAC, big, powerful computer, University of Pennsylvania, and we used it to do math. You've heard of this, right? The ENIAC? Okay, 1956, this is the beginning of AI. They got together in New Hampshire and they were like, well, what do we call this? They're like, oh, let's call it AI, artificial intelligence. And Marvin Minsky was there. All these guys are the greats from the old days. This guy also came up with something called information theory. Have you guys heard of that? Have you heard of entropy? Entropy is a word borrowed from thermodynamics, but Claude Shannon was the first to really describe it in high detail. Okay, AI keeps going through cycles, these ups and downs. So in 1956, 58, 60, they really thought they're 20 years away from duplicating human brains in computers. Now, biggest thing I've found in studying AI is you have to figure out what I is. What is intelligence? And you're forced to better understand yourself. You don't take for granted your own thoughts. But yeah, right there it says 1970. You thought we're 3 to 8 years. Look at that, 3 to 8 years away from having general intelligence of an average human being. Not even close. So in 74 to 80, everybody kind of lost faith in it. This AI thing is not going anywhere. But then it came back, and we had something called expert systems, where they'd sit down with a bunch of experts, ask them a bunch of questions, and then put their answers into programs that could hopefully do their job for them. And fifth generation project, which I don't know if that was. The revival of connectionism through Hinton and Rumelhart. So Jeffrey Hinton, who is now one of the most well-known researchers in the world, was researching connectionism, not because he's really interested in AI, he's interested in understanding brains. And that was his way to study brains. Richard Feynman, the great physicist, said, that which I cannot create, I do not understand. And that's what Jeffrey Hinton was thinking. If I can't make a brain, I don't understand a brain. But he plugged away. Jeffrey Hinton in the 80s, people were starting to like it again. But then people started to hate it again. Wait, that's not the wrong one. Here, AI Winter 2. So the collapse in specialized market for AI hardware. There's a programming language you'll never have to learn called Lisp. I had to learn it. I had to program in it. I hated it. The one thing I decided was never to make my students do it. But early guys, they loved Lisp. And there was hardware made especially to run Lisp. Those companies went out of business. And expert systems didn't work as well as they were hyped, and the government funded less, and that was the second winter. But then, yay, we're in good times again. Okay, machine learning started gaining ground. And you started seeing these packages come out of universities, like there's this one university in New Zealand that published a package called WEPA that everyone started to use for a while. Then eventually someone came out with scikit-learn. How many of you guys have used scikit-learn? It's a good package, isn't it? It used to be just a toy thing for students, but now we use it for professional things all day, every day. Okay, because the term machine learning was coined in '59. But this was a good time for AI and machine learning. It really started to pick up powerful computing and inexpensive data. Yes. So I'm in 2011. So what's next? More good times or bad times? So far, we've had, it was good here, and then we had a winter, bad times. Then good times, then bad times. Then good times. Well, starting in 2012, we had great times. The ImageNet moment happened in 2012, and that's when neural networks finally became useful. Invented in 58, not useful till 2012. But they started beating everybody at image recognition, image captioning, things like that. And ever since then, no symbolic system can catch up. What's next? Maybe more and more good times, or maybe another winter. No one really knows. If we can figure out what consciousness is, maybe we can make one. Maybe it requires quantum computers. Quantum machine learning is something that plenty of people are working on right now. And there are quantum computers that you can use. They do exist. I think back in 2015 was the first time you could rent time on a quantum computer. It was an IBM-made computer, and it only had 5 qubits, and they were very noisy. Now you can get hundreds of qubits, but they're still super noisy. For quantum computers, it's like this is the 1970s. No one has one at home. People have heard of them. They're noisy. They don't work well. They're super expensive. But it's going to come. You're going to have to know how to use this stuff. The question is when. This is a good analogy to computing of different kinds. And you can think about quantum computing as being the next thing that's going to take off. The question is when it takes off. Digital photos versus analog photos. Analog photos, of course, are the ones that use physical film. How many of you have ever taken pictures with an analog camera on physical? Oh, look it. All right. Hipsters in the house? Have any of you ever developed a film yourself? You have. All right. Color, just black and white? Black and white. Yeah, me too. That, as an art form, is still being kept alive as an art form, but it's not what we all do every day. This, of course, is a logarithmic scale. 1 billion to 10 billion. This is not 10 times higher, it's just doubly as high. See that? So it's a logarithmic scale. And this is the number of all photos taken by all humans, in each year. And then just analog photos drops off precipitously here. And this, right by here, Kodak goes out of business. The Kodak invented the digital camera. 1975. Why did they have to be the ones to go out of business? They invented it. Well, obviously, obviously they didn't have a monopoly on it anymore. If you patent something, you can only have a patent for 20 years. 1975, by 1995, there wasn't enough digital cameras that the difference between the two lines could be seen. It all happened so quickly. Think about the quality of different cameras. So let's say we'll have red for digital and green for analog. If you look over the years, analog cameras were really good. And maybe it wasn't changing that much per year. Maybe there's different add-ons you could get. Maybe they get cheaper, easier to use, but their quality is still really good all this time. Digital comes along and it sucks. It's terrible. And it costs like $1 million. So they ignored it. 1976 still sucks. 1977 still sucks. And every year, the executives at Kodak hear about this super expensive project that no one wants to use, and it's super expensive, and the pictures suck. And they keep hearing that, and they keep hearing that, and they keep hearing that. And then finally, in the mid-90s, it starts to get better. And all this time, it was actually doubling in the number of pixels, or not megapixels yet, just pixels, right? It was doubling each year, but logarithmic scale, you can't see it. And blah, 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 blah. And then there's this year where they're about the same. What do the executives think in their minds when they hear that in their meeting? Oh, our digital cameras now produce pictures that look exactly the same as the analog cameras. Maybe they'll compete with each other for a few decades. That's a good thinking. What they don't realize is that 1 year later, they could have double the number of pixels that they had, and then double it again, and double it again. People forget about exponential growth. It's going to be like that with quantum computers. They're going to totally suck for a long time, and people ignore them, and they're meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. And all of a sudden, one day, oh, it's almost as good as a normal computer. And then the next year, it's doubly as good, and then 4 times as good, and then 6 times as good, even more. That's why you need to have an idea of quantum computers. And we will touch on that later on in the class. All right. Any questions, any thoughts? I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys Thursday. And bring your laptops, not because I want you to be distracted, I don't. But there will be times I may want you guys to look things up. And we want to be connected to the world and the code of the world in this class, okay?